Right, I think we'll get a few more join us over the next minute or two, but let's get the ball rolling for today's webinar. So welcome, this is our latest EX-based webinar, and it's one of our EX Files live webinars. The EX Files are our growing collection of case studies that we have on the EX space, which are, what I love about these is they're real world stories of how people are grappling with the challenges of implementing a more human-centered approach to work and building EX teams. And we're going to hear a great case study on that later. A few quick housekeeping points. I think we've covered some of this already, but if you can mute your mics, please, until you want or need to ask a question. We've got the chat facility. You can access that at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Please use that to introduce yourselves, to make any observations, or indeed to ask questions as we're going. We'll save time at the end of the webinar for about 10-15 minutes for your questions, so we'll have plenty of time for those. But we want to make this nice and conversational, so please, if there's anything along the way that pops into your minds, please share that, and we'll ask that on your behalf. I should say we're recording the webinar. If you do need to drop off for any reason, we'll have the recording of the webinar out within 24 hours, and you'll be able to catch up where you left off. And of course, for EX Space members, all these webinars are archived on the platform. I think many of you will know me already. I'm Lee Smith, together with Emma, who you've heard from. I'm one of the co-founders of the EX Space. For those of you that aren't members of the EX Space yet, we're a membership-based learning community. We launched back in the summer, but really we're more than that. I would describe us as a kind of professional life support system for anyone in an EX role. And that sounds quite grandiose, but the feedback so far on what we've built is phenomenal. Within the platform, there's learning, bite-sized learning, CPD accredited masterclasses, which are really chunky masterclasses, which last about 6 weeks. There's tools, there's templates, there's news, reports, diagnostics, there's a community, there's webinars like this, there's case studies, you name it. As I say, it's everything really you need to build your career and surround yourself by a passionate community of EX and engagement professionals within that. So if you haven't had a look already, let us know. We'd be delighted to give you a little guided tour at any time. So just reach out to Emma, Casey, or I on that. Without further ado, the session, as I've mentioned, is EX Files Live. It's really a case study format, and I'm delighted to be joined for today's session by Sam Whitwham, who's People Experience Manager, and Laura Ewell, who's Senior Service Designer at British Red Cross. I hope I'm saying your surnames right, ladies. But if you had a surname like mine, there's no going wrong, but I don't always get it right. So delighted to welcome you on board. Laura and Sam are going to take it in turns to walk us through the story, really, of EX within the British Red Cross. Now, the British Red Cross, we all know the name, we all know the incredible work they do around crises across the world. What we possibly don't know is how long established it's been. It's a 150-year-old organisation, and yes, while we see the crisis-related work that the British Red Cross do, they do an awful lot more than that. It's a really complex organisation with lots of different audiences and communities and professionals that make up the organisation. So this for us is a fantastic case study. Not only is it charitable sector, which is always interesting and has a very clear purpose, of course, but it's also a long established organisation, an incredibly complex and challenging one. So we're going to hear from Sam and Laura in terms of how did they drive positive change in such an organisation. And I think the journey started back in 2020. You were then knocked off course a little bit with the COVID pandemic and then caught up. So we're going to hear all of that, the highs, the lows, the challenges and the successes along the way. So without further ado, Sam, if I can hand over to you to start your story. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you for having us. We're really pleased to be here and share what we're learning. I won't say what we've learned because we're still on that journey, but yeah, I'm Sam Whitwham, People Experience Manager at the Red Cross. Been in this role for about 18 months, and before that, I've been with the organisation for 13 years. So I've been here for quite a long time, and my background is kind of communications, so working within, first of all, the media team, and then into internal communications and change management, and then kind of evolved into people experience. So that's who I am, my background. I'll quickly hand to Laura so you can introduce yourself.
Thanks, Sam. Lee, you nailed the last name, got that down perfectly. Yes, I'm Laura Ewell, Senior Service Designer at the British Red Cross. I've been in the role and been with the Red Cross for about 8 months. And before that, my background's in nonprofits and tech startups. I was just chatting with Emma and Lee before you guys joined to just say that my first job title, my first sort of proper job was growth hacker, which is a very tech startup-y name for very much similar things to what we're going to be talking about: design thinking, service design. And I've had a very sort of squiggly career after that, but always felt that the service design and design thinking mindset and sets of tools and practices have stayed with me. And it is, an absolute pleasure to be using this approach and trying to embed it into the internal services of the British Red Cross.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to share my screen. So we've got a few slides, which I will share with you now. But before we kind of get into the detail, I thought I'd just give you a very quick background of what the Red Cross is and it is all about. So if I can get the slides working. So this is our vision at the Red Cross: a world where everyone gets the help they need in a crisis. So the British Red Cross makes up part of a much wider movement of Red Cross, Red Crescent societies. So I think it's about over 180 countries right across the world have got their national society. Within the British Red Cross, we've got approximately 4,000 employees, and numbers range, but between 12 and 13,000 volunteers. And as Lee kind of suggested in the intro, there's a real diversity of how we work at the Red Cross. So we've got lots of people working from home or maybe hybrid in the office. We've got our 300 plus shops, charity shops right across the country. We've got people working in communities, visiting people in their homes, people based in hospitals or in warehouses, or out driving and delivering kind of wheelchairs and things like that. So a really complex setup that we're working with. So just to kind of give you kind of a bit of how our people are working. We've also got 3 main causes that we work within the British Red Cross. So the strategy 2030 was developed in 2019 and launched in early 2020. So these are just some of the 3 of the key things that we're working towards. So our disasters and emergencies, so helping people recover from crisis, whether that might be looking out the window now, it's chucking down, so whether that's floods, fires, but it might be kind of terrorist attacks or other kind of man-made emergencies. There's health inequalities, where our volunteers and our employees kind of support people in their own homes who may not have the support that they need when kind of facing a health crisis. And then there's displacement and migration. So working with people on the migration trail, working with refugees and asylum seekers to make sure that they're living with dignity, with making sure that they are not facing destitution. So some really amazing work happening in that space as well. So this is the big 3, as we call it, the big 3 causes that the British Red Cross work towards. And supporting these 3 causes, there's 3 pillars. And one of those pillars is our people, so the people pillar. And it was then back in 2019 when we started to kind of develop this strategy that we started to talk about the people experience. So that was I think it was February 2020 when we launched our strategy 2030. It was quite a really insightful piece of work, lots of co-production. But so we launched it in February. I think it was 4 or 5 weeks later we hit our first lockdown, and so it was very much a shift immediately from focusing on how we deliver these big three to how do we deliver these big three in a completely different world, you know, having to support people working from home, having to support people balancing their work and life, as we've all experienced and we all went through together. So that was a significant kind of shift. And in that time and throughout 2020, 2021, it was very much focused on our well-being of our people. How can we support people through this difficult time? And I think it was back in April last year, so 18 months ago, that we launched our employee experience team. So this is where we focused, definitely, we had a real focus on equity, diversity and inclusion. We relaunched the people survey, so to start to hear from our people and listen to our people more about things that really were impacting them. And it was at that time we also had our ambition to map the end-to-end journey of what our people were experiencing. So about 12 months ago, this was our ambition, was to provide this clear end-to-end journey, understand all the pain points that all of our people were experiencing from before they joined the Red Cross, all the way through their time with the Red Cross, through onboarding, through moving in and building their career at the Red Cross, right the way through to leaving and beyond. So we had this great ambition, but what I couldn't really figure out was how we were going to do that. So I read a lot of books. In fact, Emma, this is one of my key go-to books. So Emma and Belinda's, if you haven't read this, it's great. Employee Experience by Design. Started to read about that. I attended one of Emma's courses on the same topic, which was really helpful. But what we realised was, we spoke to people to say, could you come in and do it for us? But the more we kind of thought about it, we realised that actually this is something that we need to build our expertise in-house and do this, because this isn't like a one-time thing. This is something that we need to shift the way that we work within the Red Cross, to really put people at the very centre of what we're doing. So that was kind of where we started. And a bit of a quick kind of background to how we got to work, to thinking about how we could do the mapping. So what we decided to do was hire a service designer to help us with that, and that's where Laura came in. In April, I think it was, you joined us, wasn't it, Laura? So I'll hand over to Laura to kind of give you a little bit of insight about how the work that she's been doing over the last kind of 6-7 months.
Thank you, Sam. Can you take me on to the next slide, please? So, yeah, as Sam said, the original brief when I joined was this kind of end-to-end mapping for 4,000 employees, and for anyone that's familiar with service design or design thinking, you'll know that being able to frame the problem that needs solving is one of the kind of key tasks and key skills of a service designer. And so when I joined, it was really about having some time and some space to really get to grips with, why did we want to do that journey mapping? Why did we want to unpack and those experiences and have these outputs, these artifacts at the end of this 1-year contract that tells the story of our employees. So before I get into what we discovered when we first took that time to really understand the problem that needed solving. I'm just going to spend a bit of time explaining the method that we use and the context around what is service design. But I suppose Lee gave us this lovely invitation at the start that we could make this a little bit more interactive. So maybe just before I to help me get a sense of the understanding in the room, if 10 was, oh yeah, I am a service designer, I can do service design, I know everything that there is to know about it. And if 1 was, I've never heard of service design before, pop in the chat where you sit in that sliding scale. 10 is, I am a service designer, 1 is, never heard of it. Before I go on and tell you all. Okay, so we've got some people who are never heard of it before, somewhere in between. Great. Okay, well, given that we've got some 1s in there, I will really give you the full hog. So service design is a practice that has its roots in something called design thinking. And this is a slide that actually we used in a presentation that I gave in my first sort of 3 or 4 weeks actually at the British Red Cross, sort of explaining the approach we would be using for the project. And it's sort of, design thinking sort of follows these steps, but it's not usually as simple as this. It's not necessarily a linear journey where you tick one thing off and move on to the next thing. You sort of bounce around them a little bit. But I like this visual. It's got the core components really of what design thinking involves, and it's about empathizing with your user. So the user really is at the heart of the process when you're designing a service or designing a product. Service designers believe that a product or service won't work if it's not designed for or with the intended user. So we want to, when we're empathizing with our user as our first step, when we're thinking about what do they need, we want to think about what are the things that they care about, what's the context that they're in, what are their behaviors. Products and services do actually often still work when they're not designed with their user in mind, because users have interesting ways of working around the problems that they face. So it's, to spend time with your user and say, how is it that you overcome the barriers that you face? So that process involves harnessing quite a lot of insights from psychology, because for people, there can be a big difference sometimes between what people say and what they actually do. And so the steps that you're taking actually are really about digging beneath the surface of what might immediately seem like the needs or behaviors of your user. And then once you've really got to know what they need and what the problems that what problems they're facing, you define the problem with using your insights from the user's perspective. And this speaks to what I was mentioning before about one of these key steps really in doing service design is about being able to properly frame the problem. That sort of sits within this defining step. And then using some tips and tricks from the sort of school of innovation, you generate lots of ideas. So one of those tips and tricks, for example, is that people generally feel more confident that their idea is the right idea if they've started off by exploring quantity over quality. So if you start off with 100 ideas, you're more confident that the one idea you end up with is right if you started there versus if you start with 3. So that's one of those tips and tricks. So you generate lots of ideas in an ideal world also with your users, but that's something that you also learn to balance when you start doing service design, is the ideal world versus the kind of organizational constraints and things like that you work in. And then crucially, this for me is, just as important as your user is the heart of the process. I think for me, the other really, really important part of doing service design, if there's one thing you're going to take away, it's to test your ideas. So the way that service designers work is to develop pilots and prototypes, and to say what are the assumptions that we're making about how people will behave or how they'll feel, and how can we test those to build up lots of really high quality evidence to make sure that our product or service will work. And then you take quite an agile approach where you continuously improve your idea based on what you learn from each prototype or what you learn from each test. As I mentioned, this isn't necessarily a linear process, because obviously what's happening is as you test your ideas, you learn more about your user, so you're empathizing with them, you might redefine the problem slightly, and then you obviously ideate to generate more ideas about how to improve things. So you're often sort of bouncing around the process slightly. But where service design builds on design thinking is they look at not just the service, so the product rather. So let's say you're developing a really great cup of coffee as a first example that came into my head. As a service designer, you're not just looking at what makes a cup of coffee really great. You're looking at what's the experience of somebody who's walking down the high street and sees the outside of the coffee shop and then walks through the front door of the coffee shop, and how do they pay for their coffee and what do they do with their cup once they finish their coffee. It's the entire journey from sort of like beginning to end from the user's perspective. So that's a little bit about what service design and design thinking is. Hopefully I've increased the number that you gave me in the chat just by even half a score. And yeah, please get in touch if you've got any questions. I'd love to talk more about it. But this is what we're doing when it comes to doing employee experience design at the British Red Cross. We're applying this set of this process and these tools to help us improve our employee experience. And when I first joined, and we were given this original brief to improve the experiences of 4,000 employees, I wanted to start off by, like I say, really being able to get a clear understanding of what these journey maps would do. And from my experience, and also from the rapid research that we did when I started, it was clear that there was a really high risk that we would come up with some artifacts that bring to life our employees' experiences so that people could make better decisions, come up with ideas that were rooted in this empathy for our people. But there was a really high risk that these journey maps would go into a drawer or a file online and not be used. And journey maps and other tools that we use, something called personas, they need to be evolving with as people evolve. So do our insights about them. And so, we wanted to make sure that whatever we came up with, whatever we were suggesting, wasn't just something that happened, for 1 year and then nobody thought about it ever again. So we also, in that rapid insight generation in the first few months, realized that there were 64 projects within people services that were aiming to improve our employees' experiences. And of those 65 projects, they were rooted in high quality evidence that we had about how our people felt. We've got people surveys that went out twice a year. We've also got new joiner surveys and leaver surveys. So we actually already had a lot of insight, and it wasn't somewhere we felt we could add the most value. And then the third kind of consideration we had when we were starting out was that for these 4,000 employees, as Sam mentioned at the beginning, they're working at very different cause areas. They're working across the UK, but also internationally. They are using lots of different technologies, and really importantly as well, they also had very different cultures. So across the Red Cross, people are in teams that work in very different ways and have different norms, and it wouldn't be possible to meaningfully capture the experiences of 4,000 people in 2 or 3 journey maps and personas. And so what we decided to do was to focus in on a area that felt that it could most benefit from design thinking, a sort of moment in the employee journey that had the potential to become more sort of employee centered. And one of those things we noticed in particular from the survey, we had really low scores for people believing that they had good career opportunities at the British Red Cross. And so there was lots of work going on to try and improve that score. But what wasn't being asked was, what do people mean when they think about their career opportunities? Because that could mean 10 different things to 10 different people. And so, when you look at this process on the screen, this design thinking process, this had this sort of moment in the employee journey had the opportunity for us to really do that first step very well, empathizing with our people. What do people mean when they talk about career opportunities? And so we had this chance to do some great design thinking on this and to improve our products and services. But then as a sort of second work stream, we were also going to do coaching and mentoring across this people services and try to embed design thinking into other projects, empowering people to take this kind of test and learn approach so that we can be more certain that our products and services for our employees are actually going to work. So next slide, please, Sam. For our deep dive into career development, we spoke with, I think, up to 25 employees within one team at the British Red Cross to, like I say, peel back the layers of, what does it mean? Why are people scoring low when it comes to their experiences of career development? So we did interviews and we did workshops and we did some shadowing. So really, the shadowing for me especially was really rewarding, really rich, because we got a really strong sense of the context that people are in. And like I say, the context people are in can say a lot really about the experiences that they have. And then at the end of the research, we've got together with our project team, but also the stakeholders that are connected with the designing and delivering career progression services. And we analysed all of the research. And as some outputs, we created some personas. So one of these personas at the moment, it's still a bit of a work in progress. It's a bit of a draft, but we wanted to share it with you. And it's got their definition of what career development means to them, the sorts of activities that they might be trying out when they're with us at the British Red Cross, what kind of contract they're likely to be on, and some characteristics. And then if you go on to the next slide, Sam, we've got their needs and their goals at the top here, and then a little bit of a journey of what this person's career at the Red Cross might be like. And this person's sort of early to mid-career person who is really excited to join the British Red Cross, and I think that's a really strong lever. That's another thing that service designers will do. They'll identify the levers, the one or two things that in this very complex system of different forces influencing an experience, what are the one or two things that can change that would unlock wider ripple effects across the whole, across every facet of their experience. And I think people being excited to join the British Red Cross and feeling proud to work at the British Red Cross is one of those levers that you can really pull on to. It kind of relates to what I was saying before about workarounds. Like, despite all of the problems, how do people manage to stay motivated and manage to get what they want from a service? And this person's really likely to have a very supportive line manager, and that person is there to help identify their skills and see what kind of career pathway they could have and link them with opportunities. But as you can see from this kind of color code on the line, their experiences for this person, on average, they will kind of get worse as some of their learning opportunities don't quite fit their needs as a practical learner. They might feel that they don't feel very confident to apply for jobs and interviews. And if they keep getting rejections for roles within the British Red Cross, they might start to feel a bit stuck and eventually might leave us. And so personas, if anyone's not familiar with personas are a tool that basically helps summarize our data and our insight about people. So they are fictional characters, but they are based on high quality evidence. And so what we'd then do, we've got 3 personas. Whenever we would in that ideation phase of the sort of little sketch I showed you a few slides back, whenever you're in that ideation phase, in a standard sort of process, people tend to sort of pluck ideas out and think, this might be a good idea, that might be a good idea, that's absolutely fine. But what we do as service designers and as people who are kind of employee centered when we're designing our products is we can use tools like personas to say, okay, to what extent does this idea match the needs of persona number 1 or persona number 2 or persona number 3? And so these artifacts are great to keep us rooted in the empathy, keep us rooted in the needs of our people, so that when we're evaluating ideas and testing things, we can use the evidence really effectively to kind of be people-centered. Yeah.
Quick observation, Laura, I'll give you pause for breath. Those 2 slides, brilliant for me, that they really highlight the power of design thinking and certain tools within the design thinking armory to kind of get under the skin of things. We all obsess about survey results, don't we? And it's easy to see a poor score around something like career development and make a whole bunch of assumptions about what that means. But as you've shown over these 2 slides, you use this tool to really get under the skin, to get into the shoes of that individual, to really understand and unpack what a score like that is all about for different people. And here, it's about paying rations to some extent. It's about the financial element. It's a little bit about the impact and the purpose that they make as individuals, the impact they have on others. And of course, it's about career development and growth and learning. But there's so much richness that have come from, just, I think you said 25 conversations to build out these personas and really get under the skin of, what on the face of it looks like a really simple number. Great illustration for me of how powerful this stuff really is.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. And we're really in that ideation phase now. So in normal speak, creating ideas for recommendations how to improve our employees' experiences of career development. And yeah, these are really, really helpful tools to kind of bring that to life as almost like a storytelling thing as well, that we can, we've felt close to it because we've met the people. It's easy for us to empathize, but our next step, our next challenge is to get that buy-in for our recommendations. And so, yeah, personas, I love for that, to be able to say, like, this might seem like a good idea, but it doesn't meet the needs of any of our personas. So yeah, I really value those. So thinking about what we can share with you guys so that, maybe you can walk away from this presentation feeling empowered to use some of these tools designing services for your people. We're going to be really honest about some challenges that we faced. And one of them is that when we started, the understanding and appreciation of what service design is was quite low within internal services. There was quite a strong, initially, like I say, our original brief was to create journey maps for 4,000 people and summarize that down into kind of 2 or 3 journeys. We had to kind of do some work in the beginning to be able to say, okay, but why do you need them? How will you use them? And the other sort of challenging, I think, sort of pressure that slightly that we felt was that doing design thinking, service design, it's often associated, and you do use very agile methodologies, things like sprints, and there's a really strong delivery focus a lot of the time. But given the context that we were in, the 65 projects that were already happening, and this sort of change fatigue that employees felt that delivering something new wasn't actually really the only thing service design could offer here. And so we had to kind of build that understanding that service design can also be about really helping to highlight challenges and problems and build design thinking capability within a space. So our top tip for you guys would be about to overcome a challenge like this is to find those supportive leaders who can champion the approach that you want to take, and to kind of highlight your small wins. Because when you're not in a sort of project where you're sort of developing a new product or pilot or prototype every month, you really want to sort of focus in on and bring to life the small wins, the things that you are delivering, the changes that you are able to make. The second challenge was about shifting the focus from organisation needs to user needs. And I actually want to reframe this slightly to say about finding the balance between user needs and organisational needs. So something that was common and is common still within internal services is for organisational needs to take precedent. And that would mean that, we've had examples of expensive projects that roll out something that meets a organisational need around efficiency, but then once it's arrived in the hands of people, they've not actually even been able to use that product or service because the software doesn't match the software that they use on a day-to-day, for example. And so that's obviously the sort of challenge that service design can help us to fix, because we, will be able to use an understanding of what our employees' software they do use. And trying to get that balance is difficult, partly because I think there's a fear that prioritizing or balancing user need or introducing user need might tip the balance, might tip the scale. So what if our employees say that they want something that's unachievable and we can't give that to them? So one of the things that I think has really helped us here is storytelling, which is another sort of component for another of our challenges. But storytelling to be able to say that we can balance both things, but also coaching and mentoring. So that's one of the things that I think has really been one of the biggest successes really of the work that we're doing. There's been 8 different projects that we've supported, and I think it's about empowering people to realize that they can do this too. I say this a lot, that I don't think that service design or doing design thinking is rocket science or some kind of wizardry. I think that it's a really accessible method and process and accessible sets of tools. And so for people to feel empowered to try those things out themselves on live projects and to have support from our team around advice and guidance, then they can see for themselves that balancing user needs and organizational needs is very much what we want to do as a service designer. We're looking at the employee experience, but also the back end part of the service, the stuff that makes the employee experience happen. And of course they have to work together if the products or service will work. And an example of that with our career development work is that we've got some tight budgets at the British Red Cross, and we've also got lots of projects going on and some of that change fatigue. And so we said, right, we recognise the organisational constraints and technical constraints that we're working under. We won't, in our recommendations, suggest anything new, but will help you to continuously improve what already exists. And that was one of our ways that we were able to kind of tackle this challenge. And then third and finally from me, building trust in the process, changing the services, improving services can be a emotionally loaded thing to do, not only because you're hoping to have employees open up and share their experiences honestly with you so that you can help them, but also for the people who design and deliver the services, you want them to feel that part of the process, and not like there's a team coming in to sort of like redo or fix something, because really actually what we love when we do design thinking and service design, what we love is failure, because there are opportunities to learn, and it is completely natural and normal. And so again, this is where storytelling came in, and having a community of practice, so a group of people who were all sort of invested and interested in and working in the career development space, so that they felt that they were very much part of the process, and that those positive, strong relationships that we had with people meant that we could be bold and courageous and challenge things from a place of kind of safety. So I'll hand over to Sam now to just round off with some sort of top tips, and then over to you guys for questions.
Thanks, Laura. That's a great overview of everything we've been doing, but we wanted, and Laura's already given you some top tips in that last little slide, but we wanted to kind of finish on some three key things that I've learned as a non-service designer, I guess, on this journey. So so from my point of view, so building resilience, I think we're seeing this kind of seismic shift, right, towards focusing on employee experience. And Lee and Emma, your recent research with EX Space and the People Experience Hub with the state of the employee experience profession, it just shows that we're on this kind of massive trajectory, right, of this focus on how we can be much more user-centered and employee-centered. But it is emerging, and I think the research shows that we're at the start of that journey, and it's going to take time. So I think there is a real element of, and as Laura's really alluded to, bringing people on this journey with you. We're talking about culture, I think almost a culture change thing, from an old way of working to a new way of working. And so I think it's about being resilient in that space, because it's going to take time to get there. You will have to have some challenging conversations with people who are kind of in that old space and don't quite understand why we have to do this new thing. So it's about kind of building that trust, reiterating the why, really putting the focus on the impact that this will have on our people, and as Laura's already said, showing those small wins regularly. Laura's kind of gone through some of the tools that we're using, but actually it doesn't matter, I don't think, at this moment, if we're not ticking off every single tool in the toolbox. It's kind of meeting people midway, and just adapting to what is great, what we can do at the moment for people experience, but also, as Laura said, what we can do to make sure we're still kind of meeting the organizational needs. So resilience is key. Being adaptable and flexible is also key. So tip 2, this was a big one for me, the start small. I had these grand visions back 12 months ago. Let's map everything all at once, everyone, everywhere. And it's just not practical or feasible. So it's, be data driven. I think, look at your data, look at where you want to start, and then start with one small, what feels like one small thing, and really do a deep dive into that. Because I think what I'm learning through following the process, or doing the process and working closely with Laura, is even though we're concentrating on one small thing, or it feels like one, it's still massive career progression in one team within the Red Cross. What we're uncovering from talking to people and listening to people are that the themes that are coming out are universal, that it will impact everyone in the organisation. So it's things like, I trouble connecting with my colleagues now in this new, post-COVID world. I don't have opportunities for joint shared learning, or there's real difficulties in finding stuff and all the different platforms that's out there. So these aren't unique to that one small team, but if we can find some solutions, pilot some ideas, that come up with some things to test some how we can remove some of the pain points. Over time, we can potentially build and scale up some of these things, and it can hopefully impact kind of the wide, many more people. So start small and don't get overwhelmed is another top tip. And then working in the open links to the storytelling element of what Laura just covered. You know, connecting the dots between initiatives. You know, people experience isn't the responsibility of one team or one kind of person who's called people experience manager. You know, it doesn't happen in isolation. One initiative will impact another and have knock-on effects like dominoes all around the organisation. So I think part of this work has really been about how we can kind of share our learning, share the research that we're learning from our people, share the insight, how that can feed into other initiatives. Because it's only by working, I think, together as an organisation and across different teams that we're able to really begin to shape that great people experience at the British Red Cross. I think I'll leave it there because I know we want to leave some time for questions. So Lee, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Sam and Laura. Fantastic case study, really fascinating. I think what really interests me is, you know, as an organisation, the British Red Cross is by definition almost about human beings. You know, your slogan there, the power of kindness, is about empathy. So in a way that your environment should be very receptive to this style of working. I think just to get the ball rolling with the questions, one of the things I always find quite challenging, Laura, you said that, you know, design thinking, service design isn't rocket science, but sometimes it kind of sounds a little bit like it is. There's so many terms, even design thinking or service design as terms in and of themselves are, you know, your eyes glaze over a little bit. Agile, sprints, those sorts of almost verging on jargon sometimes, when actually the process itself is really, it is simple, and it's about focusing on humans. How much did you have to how much did that language, if you like, get in the way during the early days of kind of using these tools, this methodology, this way of working? Did you have to sort of reframe it, or did you kind of use that kind of classic design thinking language, if that makes sense as a question?
Yeah, it definitely does. And that's why storytelling became such an important part of the work that we're doing. And as I said, that slide with the illustration of the process was a slide that we used in the first sort of 3 or 4 weeks of me starting in the role. And we had some amazing feedback, actually, because service designers have sort of come and go a little bit in the British Red Cross. They've been within our UK operations work, so dealing with those 3 cause areas that Sam introduced, but not so much of an internal services. And in those, you know, very initial first few months, I had some of those, had found some of those sort of design thinking champions across the organisation and encouraged them to come along to support me in my storytelling. And they gave some incredible feedback, really, to say that, yeah, when you strip away some of the jargon as much as possible, that for a lot of people, that was some of the most accessible ways that they've engaged with service design. It's just even that trying to repeat that kind of almost as a bit of a mantra, like it's not wizardry, is, I think, to sort of empower people into thinking as much as possible, try to see beyond the jargon and see how you're doing. A lot of the time you're doing this in your work already, and again, I think coaching and mentoring also became a really important part of trying to build the design thinking capability so that the language felt less alienating, or as much as possible not to use the language if there were alternatives.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Just a couple more questions, if I may. Sam, you've got sort of 4,000 employees, but then you've got this huge body, 13,000, I think, volunteers as well. How much do you differentiate between paid employees and those who are, you know, doing work but unpaid? Are you focused on both audiences, or do you treat them as one?
We do treat them separately because their needs and their motivations and their, you know, what they want from day-to-day experience is different, you know. So we do have a volunteer experience team, and we've got our team focuses mainly on employee experience, but we do kind of talk to each other and keep in regular contact. But I think that was the employee experience, sorry, the volunteer experience was there was a big 3-year project where they mapped the entire experience. They done a whole load of work. This was a few years ago, and developed done some great work. So the work that we're doing now is very much focused on our employees, because we've never done it with our paid employees. And we've done it with our supporters. We've got a supporter experience, so people who donate to the organisation or support us through fundraising efforts and that sort of thing. We've mapped their experience, but we've never mapped our employees. So it's like, yeah, it was time to kind of really focus in on the specific needs and ideas and motivations and everything behind why people want to have a great experience in their time as an employee.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to hog the mic, but I'm sure you're dying to ask some questions as well.
Well, actually, we've had a question in from Howard. Hi, Howard. Thanks for the question. So I'm gonna hold back my questions because we are kind of fast running out of time and go straight to Howard's question, which is a brilliant question, actually. So Howard says the start small tip is great advice, but how did you decide exactly what to focus on, and what might you do in the future? Often the prize seems so big that it can be really tough to restrict what you do in the initial phase, given the impact you want to have. It's a great question. So I'll hand that over to you guys, and then I might jump in with some ideas of my own as well.
Thanks, Howard. So I think this question speaks a little bit to balancing the organisational need and the employee or user need. So we did, like I say, in the initial bit of research when we first joined, realised there are 65 projects, things already happening, all based on existing evidence, high quality evidence about employee pain points and things like that. So we worked with we had a group of senior stakeholders who were helping to give us advice and guidance for the project to identify what the kind of criteria would be for the sort of project that we work on, what they want us to achieve. And some of the things involve, you know, some things were things you might expect, like this project would address a significant pain point for the employee, or poor experience for the employee, has high possibility for something called co-production or co-design, which is when you work together with the user group, so in our case employees, to define the project and go through the entire sort of journey of the project together with the employee. That's something we thought would be quite important. So I could go on a little bit, but to identify what were their criteria for things that they wanted for us to do, and then talk through the different options. And what we realized was that career development had this gap, basically, where there was lots of work happening in the space, but we didn't quite know what people meant by it, and that was where it felt like we had the biggest potential for impact. As you say, it can be kind of tough to restrict what you want to do when you've got this, sort of grand vision. But as Sam mentioned, but given that we had all of this existing insight, what we wanted to do was, even though we were just focusing on career progression, we could use the research here to look at the entire employee journey, every kind of moment that matters to them in their journey, and like I say, start to identify the levers. So even though our recommendations are just going to focus on career progression, we've also got lots of insights that can say, really, what we think is that these 1 or 2 problems out of 100 are that if we solve these 2, then there'll be ripple effects across all the other sort of pain points. Sam, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that was great. I think that was great cover. I think another thing that we do is just follow the data as well. You know, I think that's our starting point. You know, Laura spent 3 months when she first joined in April, just looking at the data, looking at all the insight that we've got out there, and so using things like you know, that insight that you already hold, where are the things that we can make a big difference? And that's why, you know, we use the people survey data to start, and that was a key driver for this one. And people also appreciate that, because they say, well, I've said this in the survey, and you know, and it shows that actually we're listening to them, and we're trying to understand a little bit more about why they answered that a certain way to that question. So, you know, that's been some of the feedback that when we've been doing our interviews, or been going out and listening, the qualitative stuff, it's like, oh, well, I did say this in the survey, so it's great that actually you're doing something about it. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that you're listening to me now. So I think that's another kind of element of the work. People do appreciate that being listened to.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, I mean, it's conversation we have a lot with people who are new in role. So because people that kind of join the EX space or come to the courses, sort of saying, you know, I'm really overwhelmed by this. Where on earth do I start? And that's why, you know, I was just saying to you guys before we actually started the call officially, I love using tools from design thinking and service design, because they kind of seamlessly guide you through doing the right things. We're having to kind of actively kind of remember everything. So, you know, a couple of things for me. I think, you know, starting with that insight phase is so important. And it often, I think that's a bit going back to your build resilience piece, Sam. You have to be really resilient when you're having a conversation with stakeholders about the amount of time you're spending on the insight phase. And I'll just get on with it. They hate this idea. Often there's a challenge, because it's like, just, you know, just get on with it. You know, don't spend this time researching, or we've already done the research. We've done the research, and it's like, yeah, you've asked a bunch of questions, and that's useful, but often, from my experience, the questions haven't been asked in the right way. So just give you a quick example. If you say to someone, what do you need to have a great experience at work, or what do you need to have a great career development experience, then we'll give you a very different answer than if you say, tell me about a time when you had an amazing career development experience, that storytelling piece. And the answers you'll get will be so different, and the insights you'll get will be so much truer. So you've got to be really careful about where you ask the questions. So I think one for me is like, really fight to do that insight phase, because once you've done that, then you've got the foundations, because then you're not going to be making assumptions. Then you can work on the right things. Then you know what those moments that matters are, what those levers are, what are the things that are going to make the biggest difference to your people, and you're not just basing it on a bit of a hunch. So for me, that's critical, and the way you ask the question. So even when we work with people who say, we've got loads of insights, and they have, and they're great, but there'll always be 9 times out of 10, I say always, but 9 times out of 10, there'll always be a case for us doing a little bit more digging. Maybe it's the shadowing piece you talked about, Laura, or maybe it's that appreciative inquiry. What does good look like? And asking it in a very storytelling way, so you kind of really get to the heart. Because, you know, as you said before, what people say and do are often quite different. So they might say, oh, well, this is what I need to have a great experience at work, or have a great career development experience. But when you ask, tell me about a time when you actually had that, what's going on, then you get to the real insights there. So a few tips from me, and then using those moments that matters piece to really pull out the bits that are going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. Because again, you know, it's so easy to focus on things that look like they're going to make a big difference, or some stakeholder somewhere has got a bit of a bee in their bonnet about something that's a bit shiny and sexy, like, oh, let's just like bring in a lovely app that gives people perks. And let's see so many companies do that, and that's going to solve everything. And guess what, it doesn't. And it's like, oh no, you know, it's like, oh, well, it's too late now. I invested loads of money, it's going to swear then, loads of money, you know, this shiny app gives people perks, but actually our people still not having a great experience. So those would be my tips. Back over to you, Lee, now, because I think, we're at time. We're on the
hour, yeah. We're just after the hour. Thank you, Emma. Emma mentioned it in chat. I'll just mention it again here. If you're interested in design thinking, there's loads of resources and tools within the EX space, of course. And our next big masterclass, which we'll be launching early in the new year, is focused on exactly that. It's called the EX Designer. It's a 6-week masterclass that will take you through all aspects of design thinking and how you apply it to EX. So if that's of interest, please let us know, and we can tell you more about that. Sam, Laura, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating case study. Love to hear about your journey. We'd love to come back to this maybe in a year's time and hear how you're getting on and what the next phase of this journey look like. But really appreciate your insights and what you shared, everything you shared with us today. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
thanks, Laura. Lovely to see you again, Sam, and lovely to hear about the journey since we last spoke. So it's really, yeah, it's wonderful to hear about it, and really looking forward to seeing what comes next.
And for everyone who's dialed in, thank you. Great to have you
Yeah, thanks
today.
everyone for dialing
And
in.
we'll speak soon. Take care.
Take care. Bye.